Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. When you had fulfilled the dispensation for our sake and united things on earth with the things in heaven, you were taken up thither in glory, O Christ our God, going not away from any place, but continuing inseparable, and to them that love you, crying out, I am with you, and there is therefore none against you. Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
Well, we're really glad to have you here. We're glad that you guys have joined us. I fixed the website, so if your friends are texting you and you need to give them the right link, they're all correct now, I hope. This is our last OCF at Home discussion for the semester. I think it's been a really exciting and great run, a really lovely theme. I feel like Father Tom Hopko, he's such an integral part of OCF, even if you don't know it. Like, he's one of the people who helped really get OCF off the ground back in the 60s, and was involved in OCF pretty much at our campus ministry pretty much his entire life after that. And it's been really neat to honor him by reflecting on his Maxims. That was not my Zoom instructions, but I'll give the Zoom instructions reminders. When Deacon Niko asks a question, you can raise your hand. We'll pull you up on the screen so you can interact with him and Caroline. Please raise your hand. It's actually more fun when you do, and we get to see you and sort of feel like we're real humans in real life. You can also ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and Caroline and I will be watching those. And I think that's it. Caroline, I'm going to toss it to you for a sec.
So we don't really have any announcements. We are obviously wrapping up our OCF at Home series. We've wrapped up our OCF chapels. So we really would like to still have some of your interaction and involvement throughout the summer. So please keep sending suggestions, things that you liked about it. I think feedback would be great. You can still send all those messages to slbchairman@ocf.net. However, you will not be emailing me. You will be emailing Andrew Gluntz. So
Caroline's been officially kicked off. This is her final hurrah, everyone. So everyone should say thank you to Caroline and congratulate her tonight. I did forget, I think last time we mentioned that we will be doing a virtual version of our Summer Leadership Institute, which will be open to the same cohort of 50 students, but will be a little bit different this year. Full details and registration should be open for it. It will be free June 5th. So that's something to look forward to over the summer if you want to get a little more involved in what OCF does. All right, we're good. All right, Deacon Niko, we're ready for you.
All right, wonderful. Really good to be here with you all. Really good to be talking on one of Father Hopko's Maxims here. One of the things I really like about going right here at the end with one of his last, this is Maxim 54, one of his last Maxims is that this whole idea, this whole concept of Maxims implies an ideal that we can live to, right? But this ideal can be crippling if it's not framed right. Right. And I remember, even back at seminary, and at seminary, to be totally frank, it's one of the times where you feel like you really, really have to get everything perfect. You're looking around and you see everyone else working their hardest at living the life of the faith and failing in many different ways. We all struggle in our own way, but you see yourself under the microscope and think you have to be perfect. So when I remember the first few times I read these Maxims, I thought to myself, I can't keep up with that. No chance. Like this is way beyond what I can do. And actually, Maxim 54 is something, and it is when you fall, get up immediately and start over. That's something I really only took to heart, I think, after my first round of parish ministry, where I really got knocked around a bit. It was hard. You went from school to school to school, and then finally got into the real world, and the real world wasn't very friendly. And this maxim kind of lightened the load of all of the rest of them. It changed my perspective from get these right or else to you're going to get these wrong. So just keep going. Like, just forget, like, don't worry about it, leave it behind and just keep going. So this one really resonates with me. I'm really happy it was the one I got to pick, and I'm glad this is the way we're going to wrap up this talk on his maxims. Now, I want to start off by talking a little bit about perfectionism. So when we read this maxim, it's very simple. When you fall, get up immediately and start over. But it's really hard to execute. And it's hard to execute, especially for the perfectionist, the one who wants to solve the problem before moving on from it, to really figure out why they fell. So my question is, my question for you all is, what does a perfectionist look like? Can you guys profile a perfectionist for me? That's where I really want to start with this.
That's great. Anyone feel like raising their hand? If anyone comes up on the screen and just gives a description of Caroline or me, that would be a sufficient answer.
I'm not gonna lie, I was about to text my brother and tell him to give a description of me, I dare you, but you just said it.
Hey, Andreas.
Hello. Christina, I'm glad you said that if anyone comes up and gives a description of you and Caroline, that's good, because I was kind of about to do the same, but for me, I guess I'm just, here I am with all my drafts here and everything. I guess I'm a person that really tries to go through things multiple times and is not really satisfied with the first or the second try. And I really think that, when you kind of boil it down and look at it at its core, a perfectionist is kind of, I guess, someone who feels like they could never get it right, no matter what they do, no matter how hard they try. And that sometimes is never really necessarily satisfied with something, and sometimes maybe they'll just, give up saying good enough.
Not Thomas, what do you want to add to that? Creative name today, Thomas. Creative name.
Thank you. Put a lot of thought into that one. But one thing that I was thinking of was what you were saying, and then also wanting to control every aspect, wanting to eat let me throw myself into the leader of something like college conference. Even things that are completely out of control, if that person in that leadership position would be worried, and they'd agonize, and it would ruin the experience of just the overall experience. And even if something went 90% perfect, like everything except for 10% of everything was perfect, it would still be, they'd be bogged down on all the wrong that happened, and they'd want to control every aspect. So I was thinking, thank you, Booba.
I love the applause.
Yeah, thank you guys for contributing. I appreciate it. Any follow-up to that, Deacon Niko, before I send them back to their friends?
I think you guys have set me up perfectly for where I want to go. Eleni added to here, it's a person who refuses to accept any standard short. I mean, someone who's, you guys have identified high achievers, you guys have identified people who have that really high motor to get something perfect, right? Perfectionist, perfect. We love putting those together, and we're looking for people who kind of put out that image of perfection. And it's funny, I always thought the same thing. I always thought a perfectionist was someone who had that look. When I was at the seminary, we had someone who'd put together all of our study guides and run, all our study groups, and frankly, do pretty much everything we needed to get the courses done. And in my mind, that was a perfectionist. Right? A perfectionist was someone who got near the point of perfection and was just constantly annoyed by the fact that she couldn't get to that point. And then I realized it's actually only a small part of what a perfectionist is. And I only realized that as I was out in parish ministry, I realized, shoot, I'm struggling from perfectionism. And it hits me in a very different way. It isn't that I'm going to agonize over the last detail. It's that I have so many things that I could imagine going wrong, so many things I could imagine going right, so many ways I could solve the problem differently, that I get locked up in which way to go. Which way do you go when every different way could lead you to a better way? What book do you read first? When I walk into the school bookstore and I look at all of these different theological texts, do I read one of the fathers? I mean, you figure you can't go wrong, right? But then you start reading that, you realize it's dense as anything. Okay, maybe not that. How about this other book? Well, no one's really recommended it to me, so should I read that one? Well, would it be a waste of time? It might be a waste of time. So I'm not going to read that one. Okay, I won't. And you end up not picking any of them or buying a bunch of them and never reading them, because who knows if they're worth your time, and you just burn your time. It's, yeah, George, absolutely. It's analysis paralysis. It's our minds getting the better of us. So, we think of perfectionists as the high achievers, but we have to realize it's something we all really struggle with. American culture really pushes the mentality that we need to be high achievers. We need to dream big, right? This is all over elementary schools, big posters that say nothing but dream big. It's all got to be, someone's going to write your biography. And all of that really puts a lot of pressure on us. And that manifests itself in a lot of different behaviors. They can be the high achieving, but they can also be the ones who end up totally, bottlenecked in their dorm room, not sure what book to read. So they end up sitting there playing video games for 12 hours straight, 22 hours straight. Yeah. So perfectionism is the first thing I kind of want to talk about as we reflect on this maxim. Now, hold on. I want to look real quickly because Eleni, okay, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, when you fall, get up immediately and start over. Perfectionism becomes our first major stumbling block. Why? And this is something I struggled with for the longest time. I really struggled with the fact that before I asked for help, I needed to understand the problem comprehensively and have had control over it. I couldn't go to the priest for confession and say, look, this is what I'm struggling with. I'm going to end up struggling with it again tomorrow. I don't know why, but I'm just going to keep going with this. I had to go to him and say, look, this is something I used to struggle with. I fixed it now. Like, I'm good. This is a problem I used to have. So go ahead and tell me it's okay now, because I fixed it myself, and, we're good to go. And you know what that does? It keeps you from ever asking for help in the first place. Because the reality is that we find ourselves in a loop where we're constantly chasing our own problem. We're constantly chasing our own problems. And this maxim is something that we end up ignoring. Instead of getting up immediately, we stay there down on the ground. Why? Well, because maybe I'll figure out why I fell from here. We stay on the ground because we think we deserve it. We kind of get humility wrong. We think humility means just being sad and pathetic and staying on the ground, beaten. When the reality is, humility is asking for help, for a hand up, right? It's asking for Christ to fill us and for that light to enlighten that darkness, right? Our job isn't to fix our own problems. Our job is to ask for help. That's humility. Humility is asking for help when you need it. Recognizing that you are not your own salvation. You can't be your own salvation. No matter how hard you try, it won't work. So the first thing I really wanted to talk about was perfectionism here. Because I think so often we think of perfectionists as the high achievers, and we have to remember, we all struggle with it to some degree. May not be disorder, but we're all going to struggle with it to some degree. And the kid who sits in his room and skips half his classes and doesn't do his laundry and, halfway through the semester gets kicked out because, no one's seen him and they walk in and you could actually have to quarantine anyone who's been in that space. That person is often struggling with the fact that they don't know who to ask for help or they're too proud to ask for help. So I wanted to start with perfectionism with this, because I think we have to understand it, recognize it, and address it. The best way to address it, well, there are a lot of different ways to address it. Talk to your priest about the fact that you feel like something as simple as going and telling him you feel like you have to get control of your sins before you bring them to confession. Like, that's worth saying. If I had people tell me that, well, I'm not a confessor, but if all the same, I have people talk to me about things, and if someone told me that, I would totally understand that that's a real difficult struggle. So feel free to talk to your clergy about the fact that you struggle with things before you've gotten control of them. Definitely before you've gotten control of them. So with that, I'm going to take a second, read the comments, see if there's anything I need to.
We got you on the comments. Don't worry.
All right, good. I tend to, keep track of things. Now, I want to go from perfectionism to akidia, to acedia. Gosh, I've heard it pronounced a billion different ways. Akidia is what it is in Greek. If you translate it into English, it's messy. People translate it as listlessness, restlessness.
Idleness.
Any other ones, Christina?
Idleness. Somebody said despondency.
Idleness. Sloth is the Western traditional translation for it. But even Catholics, like I've listened to a few Catholic podcasts on akidia, and they all make a point to say sloth, I think, is just kind of, we've turned it into just meaning laziness.
Isn't it also what they translate the noonday demon? Isn't that
noonday demon?
Yeah, like
and that's really
that nap time feeling at 2 in the afternoon when you just don't know what to do with yourself, and
that's
kind of get stuck.
That's from Evagrius, right? That noonday demon concept is, akidia is what the Desert Fathers would talk about. The Desert Fathers and Mothers would talk about as that midday restlessness in prayer, when you're sick of the mundane prayer rule and you want to do something meaningful, something impactful, something that's going to change the world. Prayer would do that, but you want to do something else. So what is that something? It could be anything. It could be everything. And what do you end up doing? A whole bunch of nothing. Akidia, the thing about it is that it's that feeling of where I'm at right now isn't where I want to be. I don't like my current situation. I don't like my place. I don't like maybe my people, my work, and what I'd like to do is everything else. Not anything else, everything else. As you're sitting in class, you want nothing but to have a job. When you have a job, you want nothing but to be sitting in class. When you just want to be out of your situation. And this is really one of the plagues of our generation. Like the internet age has really given us the perspective that everything is possible. It's something I definitely struggle with, because I am a creative brain who loves to dabble in lots and lots and lots and lots of different things. And you sit down and you could do anything. So you don't. You start to think, and again, we go back to perfectionism. You start to think, well, what would be best? What would be a waste of time? It'd all be a waste of time. And it kind of taps into some of our, I won't go too far into this now, but our existential issues. What's the purpose of life? And all of a sudden you end up way out there. Akidia is this really difficult temptation that and as the fathers talk about the different passions, Akivia kind of goes in the middle. It's like the one that transitions you from the base animalistic, not that hard to get away from ones, like the ones you can leave behind easy. It takes you more to the ones of despair, right? Akivia connects your boredom to despair. And what ends up happening is, and as students, I'm sure you guys can relate, at least I definitely could as a student, you sit there in the middle of your day, and then instead of doing your boring work, you start to question what the point of it all is. You start to come up with huge ideas. You start to do anything but the task at hand. So Akivia is one of those things that we struggle with as a generation. And it really also, and the other thing I wrote in the outline here is the intolerance of reliance, right? Akivia goes hand in hand with our pride. This sense of restlessness comes with this sense of, I need to fix it myself. I need to find my way out of it. I need to just pick a path and follow it instead of asking for help. So my question now to you all is, in what ways do you see Akivia playing out in college life? Like, what way do you guys see it in your worlds?
Okay, I'm ready for some hands to go up.
I mean, I feel like I've felt it a lot during this quarantine, you know, like, especially right now, not having a job, not having a lot to do. I'm really glad that you said this word, because I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and we were talking about this word. I was like, there's a word that I was reading in a book by St. Paisios that like perfectly describes this situation that's happening for me right now, but I couldn't remember it to save my life. So I have been feeling this a lot, and I think like what his thing, like when I was reading the book, it was basically like, when you're feeling this, like, don't move. Like, you're feeling like you need to go somewhere and do something and do all this stuff. It was like, don't give in to all that feeling. So I like keep trying to tell myself that, but I think also what you're saying is like relying 100% on yourself to do that, especially during like quarantining and all this like stuff, being stuck at home. Like, it's really kind of hard to not have anyone else to help like break up that feeling. I don't know.
It's why it was so important for the monks to have prayer rules, right? It wasn't just enough to say, go pray, find the ones that resonate with you most.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and biggest temptation, you know, straight, you know, here's the honest answer for me. One of my bigger temptations is wanting to set my own world up my own way. I am, you know, I have always done my own thing.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
All right, Siri.
Siri.
Siri wanted to contribute to the conversation tonight. I love it.
Oh my gosh. But, you know, I've always been that way, and it's where asking for someone else's guidance. Honestly, one of the things that's been hard for me in quarantine is losing access to like my trainer in my gym. Someone was giving me, you know, I had a trainer and I had my routine. My routine was something I had developed with the help of other people. That workout routine started every day. Every single day started with that workout routine. I was there in the gym. I would then go hit the showers, go to work. Like, it was just boom, boom, boom. And losing that routine left me with a lot more time and a lot less of a clue of what to do with it. I'm lucky in the sense that my office stayed open. I'm blessed by the fact that this happened during Lent, which for clergy means lots and lots of structured services. But I felt it once Lent ended, and we added a couple services, but you know, you lost a lot of that structure. Because that's the thing, that advice not to move is really hard if you don't have support or a routine. Because what does that mean? What does it mean not to move? And I actually put that to you, like, Caroline, what do you think?
You're asking me. I mean, like, I think it's just like I don't know, like not trying to change all those things, not trying to like tackle everything that's going on. Like for me, I think it's just like taking that moment of silence and like refocusing on what you actually need to do, like which, you know, should be prayer or like should be like centering and refocusing your life, instead of like thinking that what you're doing isn't enough. You can still find ways that there are things that you're doing that like are enough.
Justin said, accepting the cross of the present, which Christ has given to you. That is not moving.
Accepting the cross of the present, which Christ has given you. That's not moving.
I like that.
I like that a lot. Though we're called to carry that cross. So where are we going with it? And this is, and I'm extending the metaphor too far.
Maybe, I think maybe he means just like not fighting it. Maybe like having a sense of like you were saying earlier about not trying to control everything, but maybe just of like accepting what's been given, and as gift is like a way to not move. Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't know, Justin, tell me, you can come up and tell us if we're right, or you can tell us in the chat if you prefer not to, but we're trying to sort out your thoughts. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Justin said, we're carrying our crosses by carrying it through each moment, each second, each hour. Yeah. So it's still sort of like a present moment, not a running away from what's been given right now.
And I challenge this because I want to make sure we don't leave it at a theoretical level, right? Carrying your cross can be very theoretical. Staying still can be really theoretical. I mean, Caroline, you make a really good point about silence. Yes is absolutely the answer to that. But how much can you take before you end up in, how trained are you in silence to sit there before you start to wander?
I can tell you personally, not a lot.
Which is normal, right? I mean, you have to train to sit in silence. It's not something that is natural. I couldn't give you a half-hour timer and say, hey, sit in silence for a half hour, focusing on nothing but the Jesus prayer. If you haven't done 5 minutes of it, you're not going to do a half hour. It's really important. It's really important to have a plan, right? When you get to these points, have a plan, to have a rule, to have something to rely on that isn't busy, but is frankly the work of the monk at noontime. If we go back to Evagrius, we go back to the desert. You go back to the Desert Fathers. What is the call when that noontime temptation hits? To double down on your prayer, to stick to your prayer. Now is not the time to go pick up an extra job or to figure out what other new project you can start. Now is the time to stay focused in your prayer. It's really important to ask for that help, to not assume that, well, it's your cross to bear, you're going to bear it on your own. That is the time to ask for help. And again, I kind of go back to perfectionism, not once you figured out what you want the priest to say, and then you tell him exactly how you think you could solve the problem, and then ask him to go ahead and rubber stamp it for you, right? You want to come earlier than that. You want to come when these things are really as difficult as they can be. I got to pull up all right.
I thought it was interesting what you said about Akivia earlier about it being like the bridge between the like concupiscent sins, or like the fleshly sins, and like sort of the more intellectual sins. Because I feel like during this time when you feel like, I don't know, when you get stuck in that mode, you can very easily slip one way or the other. And just yesterday, I was having a conversation with some other campus ministry people who were saying they were hearing from a lot of students, and I'm curious, you don't have to say, but if this is happening for some of our students, like that they're falling the other way, like not some into despair and anxiety and fear, and some like into really bad habits, like struggling more with social media addiction and pornography, which we talked about just a couple weeks ago on OCF at Home. And I don't know, I never realized that was sort of teaching, like that's kind of like this middle place. Whenever you get stuck here, you might fall this way, you might fall that way, but it's kind of like a dangerous, not dangerous, but like a place you need to really be attentive to when you catch yourself there. It's like the doorway or the gateway into something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's the college dorm room in the middle of the day. You know, there are a lot of things happening that are vices. You know, I mean, this is where day drinking starts, right? You're in college, you're by yourself, you don't have parents around. Middle of the day, you don't have classes. Maybe your day's done at 2:00. Well, you got nothing. You can't. I mean, you're stuck in that spot where you don't know where to go. And what do? Well, grab a beer. I mean, we see it in honestly right now. You see alcoholism really popping as a topic of conversation in the middle of the coronavirus stuff, because it's people are relying heavily on it in the midst of their boredom, in the midst of their akivia, right? They're not stuck in this place of listlessness because they're sick of their routine. Their routine's been totally annihilated, and they're confused, and they don't even recognize their reality. And they get caught in these temptations, all kinds of different temptations. Some are falling into despair. I mean, that's definitely, and that you need to get help quick, because that can really spiral. I mean, those are the kind of spirals that can be incredibly soul damaging. Father Silvio last year at the Great Lakes Regional Retreat I love the way he talked about the more animalistic passions. He really wrote them off. He's like, just cut it out, is the way he put it. He was like, you know, for things like the sexual passions and things like that, like, okay, you dog, now stop. It's like simple. It's like clean cut. Like you know why you fell into this. You let the stupid reptilian brain, it's still in your brain, take over the rest of the smart brain, and you just stop, right? You're not going to hell. Just leave it behind. Like, this is not going to carry, you're not carrying this the rest of your life. Leave that where you found it, put it back, and just move on. It's easy, right? We bring up Akidea. It's easier, I should say, because we have to be careful. A lot of these things are actually tied to more of our sense of despair. When we feel despair, what do? We go to where we're comfortable. Where are we comfortable? We're comfortable in whatever vice it is we've attached to it. In those cases, things that can be helpful, frankly, are good spiritual guidance, but also cognitive behavioral therapy. You know, good therapy is a really good way to help separate those things enough that you can look at them, assess what they are, and then use the antidotes in the church to heal them. All good therapy, again, I'm careful to say good therapy because there's a lot of wacky therapy too, but good therapy, all it does is it helps you identify what it is you're looking at, what it is you're struggling with, so that you can then deal with it. So yeah, Christina, to your point, I mean, Akidea definitely, it's where college students end up falling into a lot of the vices, or younger. Let's be honest. It's where, you know, kids end up falling into vices that stay with them their whole lives. And they make that association with, I'm afraid. You know, it's the middle of the day. I don't like what I'm doing. I don't like that my parents make me do work. I don't like that, you know, I have homework. Is this going to be forever? Man, life stinks, you know, the typical teenage chorus. And then you say, okay, well, this all stinks. I'm going to do something that feels good. And those things end up becoming habits and sticking with us. So I wanted to talk about Akidea because I think we can't treat this maxim like it's as simple as it sounds, but its simplicity is so impactful if we can accept it. So any other thoughts or comments here?
We had a few from the chat. Caroline, did you want to scroll back a little for Justin and William?
Oh, yeah. Wait, so, sorry.
Okay, William said, St. John Cassian says in his institutes that all the vices we fight and the virtues we attain are through God's help, not our own efforts, which I think was when you were saying earlier about not trying to figure it out ourselves. I think that's when that comment came up, Deacon Niko. And then Justin, I think still in response to our conversation about carrying the cross, said, It's not theoretical if it hurts. And that's when you reach out to Simon of Cyrene, which again is a reaching out for help in the bearing of a burden you can't bear on your own.
Right, right. And that's where we now get into antidotes, right? So that's a great transition. You know, the next thing on the list here is what is it we can do in the face of this quicksand of Akivia, right? And the only way out is to ask for help. You know, it's funny. I've watched, what is it, Bear Grylls or one of those survival guys, like show you how to get out of quicksand. I think I found it on YouTube. You know, where they're like, here's how you can get out by yourself, and the only way out is like absurd core strength. So that's a prerequisite. If you don't have it, you ain't getting it. And being so comfortable in the situation and confident you know how to get out that you don't panic. Again, if you don't start with it, you're not going to find it. So, you know, the way to get yourself out of quicksand is a bunch of things that the average person, frankly, can't do. And he sits there and says, well, if you can find the ability to do this, you're in luck. Well, you're not going to. What is the best way to get out of quicksand? Someone who's not in quicksand. A hand from someone who's not in quicksand. That's the best way. And to have them slowly pull you out of that bog. Right? And our antidotes for Akivia, they start with humility. Again, I go back to what is humility? Humility is not, when we hear the saints reflect on how they're the worst of all sinners, we have to be careful not to start our humility there. That's not a starting point for humility. That's a point where you have absorbed, where you have processed, where you have connected so thoroughly with the love of God and love of neighbor that you can see the roots of sin in your heart. We aren't starting there. This is Bear Grylls again with core strength. We're not there. So let's not start there with humility. If we think humility is, as you know, saying to ourselves, I'm awful, that actually feeds Akivia. That kind of false humility, that self-deprecating behavior, that actually makes it a lot worse, because you sit there and you just feel more negatively about everything. What is real humility? And I think Metropolitan Anthony Bloom says this in Beginning to Pray, but he talks about how real humility is turning to God when we struggle. When we find ourselves in struggle, turning to God first. And he uses the images of turning to our other people in our lives in tandem. He makes the point that it's not that, you know, when we need help with something that we don't have an expertise in, if we have a broken shoe, it's clear we go to a cobbler, right? We go to someone who could fix a shoe. We don't try to figure it out ourselves. We go to someone who we know can help. And that's incredibly important. To be humble is to be vulnerable and to turn to God and each other for help. So that's really an antidote to Akivia. You're sitting there in the middle of your school day. Instead of diving into whatever vice it is you think will make you feel better, call someone. Call a friend. And I say call, and then I'm like, man, I'm old. No one calls anymore. But the reality is, don't text because you can ignore it. You want to get someone who's going to be able to actively engage you. So jump on Discord and hop in a voice channel. I don't know. Like, there are other ways that aren't a phone call using numbers. Phones used to have numbers on them. They were cool. You know, there are ways to but get involved in an active conversation with someone. Not passive, not something where they can kind of fall out of the conversation and you stop. Something where you are going to talk through it until you really feel heard. And that is a first big step. Another one, develop a relationship with a father confessor, with a priest. And get comfortable interrupting them. get comfortable be annoying them. A good father confessor won't show he's annoyed, but you know what I mean? Get comfortable with the fact that you think you're annoying them. That's why we're here. Again, not a confessor yet, but that's why we're here, right? We're here because, like, if I had too many people calling me in the day, that'd be the greatest problem ever. The reality is I sit there at my desk trying to figure out what cool projects I want to pick up, because we don't get many people calling the church. People tend to keep their problems to themselves. We got asked the other day, someone asked me, they go, how many people in your community have coronavirus? I said, I have no clue, because no one calls. Unless someone actually passes away, no one calls. So, you know, we hear through the grapevine is usually what happens. So call a priest, build a relationship. If you have an old priest that you haven't talked to in 15 years that you loved back at camp in the day, call them. But ask for help, because that's our way through. Don't be afraid of asking for more help, asking for a meeting, asking for them to refer you to a therapist. I can't say this enough. Therapy will help you to sort out what you're thinking, what you're talking about, what your struggles are, so that a priest can actually help you then address them in a more useful way. So we can use these things together to really untangle these knots. So humility and vulnerability, asking for help. If I've said it 20 times now, I'm going to say it again, just ask for help. That's the Orthodox way. Don't do it yourself. You get no points for doing it yourself. Every story about a monk doing it themselves ends up with them standing at the edge of a cliff about to step off because they think they've ascended to heaven. So don't do it yourself.
Who was it who said the only thing you can do alone is go to hell?
I don't know, but I love it. Wait, who was it? I got logos here. I'll have to pull it.
I'll look for it for you while you keep talking, but I like that.
Yeah, the only thing, that's exactly it. The only thing you can do by yourself is go to hell. That's accurate. So any thoughts or questions here?
Apparently it was a common saying that Father Tom liked. There you go.
Oh, there you go. That's probably right. That's probably where we heard it. Is he probably like spit it out in one of his podcasts or?
So I think Justin said he thinks it's a common Russian saying. So that might be where Father Tom liked it.
Okay, I like that. Man, I love little Russian sayings like that bite. Those are good. Any other thoughts here? I have one last kind of section we'll get into. Go ahead.
We have a question here from William that says, how is sloth a form of spiritual complacency?
Okay. Do you need him to say more?
I just wanted to talk about it a bit more if possible. How is sloth a form? I'm just trying to find exactly how I want to respond to it. You know, and I shy away from the word sloth because we associate sloth with laziness, and really laziness is not akidia. It's busyness more than it's laziness. It's filling your plate with a whole bunch of nothing. You know, it's pulling up a web browser and clicking mindlessly on every link across your bookmarks bar because you're bored and you don't do it. It's pulling up your phone and flipping through every different app and not even remembering what you saw in those apps, right? Akidia is mindless roaming. So spiritual complacency, I mean, I would say it's what we do as a vice to avoid the hard work. And it comes with reason, like a lot of things I'm talking about are reasons why we turn to it as a vice to avoid hard work, and we can recognize why we do it. But at the end of the day, it's what we end up doing it to avoid the real difficult tasks. And actually, that connects me well to the last part I'll go into then, because one of the other issues that we fall into, especially in our day and age, is, again, dream big, right? I go back to, and I appreciate elementary school teachers. I appreciate all teachers, but the signs all over the place encouraging everyone to have enormous aspirations, they're useful, but they need to be combined with a good appreciation for the mundane. This is something I only really learned the last couple years, to love the mundane, love the little things that, you know, again, even my gym routine, like, it seems so boring and repetitive, but at the same time, it's part of my daily routine and it's something that's important to me. What we need to be careful of is thinking we're going to hit a home run on everything. You know, there's a movement right now, and I know Jordan Peterson's the one who said it, but it's not, this is just a general positive psychology tool. And starting with something as simple as cleaning your room, right? Like, you want to change the world, but you can't clean your room. Like, let's start with what can be done in the moment. What can be done is the simple things, you know, sorting, you know, putting your clothes away. And yes, my wife's sitting right there and she's going to look at me because I don't put my clothes away. It's those little things though, right? Those are really important skills and habits to build. Doing those little things and appreciating the opportunity to do those little things every day. Waking up every day, and, you know, one of the big things, actually, the mundane. Every day, I walk this little goofball. I'm going to make her sit up. I got this little puppers, right? And actually, this was part of my own kind of process of transitioning from my school years to my adult years. Getting the dog and going for a walk every day, having to do that to tend to another creature, was a real big part of my maturity process and a part of learning to appreciate the little things. Every single day, 1.5 miles, this girl needs her walk. Like, that's how it's going to go. So, so my last kind of question for you all is, what I want to know is if you guys could, how do I want to say this? What are the biggest little things? Okay, so this is how I wrote it. I'm glad I wrote it. What are the biggest little things a college student could focus on? Or a recent graduate who's about to go into the workforce for the first time? What are the biggest little things you all could focus on?
You guys want to throw them in the chat for us? It's a good one. Waking up promptly in the morning.
Oh my gosh. Waking up promptly in the morning. That's a huge one. Our routine made a big turn. So, okay, I will give one that goes really well for married couples. One that goes really well is, none of you are married couples, but as you guys approach that stage of life, this is one that works really well, is waking up and going to bed together. Always at the same time, like, because it keeps you honest about waking up early in the morning, right? When one of you has to get up, you both get up and don't snooze. My OCF people know I always complain, and my Goyans really know, I always complain about snooze. It's useless. It does nothing to help you feel more rested. It's just a bad habit.
We got a few more.
All right, sitting next to someone new in class. Yeah, I mean, little social things, like engaging new people, building out your support network, getting used to treating strangers like human beings. Yeah, that's definitely one.
Caroline, you want to read some of those?
Yes. Someone was saying about making their bed every morning. And I think this is a big one, being present with your family when you're home, especially knowing that the opportunity to be with family, and particularly grandparents, becomes less and less the more you move away and start working your first job. Practicing stillness daily. It's a good one. Just listening to the birds on a walk. Being grateful for all the tutoring and office hours sessions with your professors. William said he's made a lot of friends with his professors after graduation because he talked with them every day. And then I think I was getting up to the same ones.
I know Caroline's, I'm sure, heard me say this before. Maybe some of you listening today have also heard it. I feel like a lot of like real growing up is the realization that like life is, most days are full of like the same things, and like that the life of a Christian for the most part is not retreats and meetings and conferences, and like those things are, they are important, and there's like an importance of having them at a certain time in your life to strengthen you. But like the real daily life of a Christian is to be able to wake up in the morning and say your prayers and be grateful throughout the day and repent when you make a mistake. Like when you fall down, get right back up, and you know, to end your day with gratitude and then kind of start it all over again the next day. You know, there's not as many, I don't know, and it's not a negative thing, at least to me, that there's not all these peak experiences. Those are really important formative experiences I have. But it was a little bit hard, I think, to accept at some point, like that grown-up Christian life is kind of boring. Kind of simple. It's a lot simpler than I think you anticipated.
Yeah. Let your currency become ascetic rather than experiential.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to unpack that. Ascetic. We use ascetic often to talk about like desert monks. So we need to take a step back and realize I don't mean, you know, when I say we should be ascetic, I don't mean we should all run off to the desert. Ascesis is exercise, is training, right? I always love to use imagery from physical training because it's just the most obvious to us. You know, how do you build muscle? You build muscle by exercising regularly. You can't do it all at once. You can't have a revelation of muscle. There is no like, oh, I understand muscle now and now I have it. You just have to do a little bit every day, and slowly but surely it builds, and it wanes when you get sick and when you fall on your bike and break your arm like I did in October. You know, it wanes, but you get back to working and it comes back, and you just keep going. And health is actually in your resilience to that. Your physical health is in your resilience on that work. You can't ever achieve physical health by having crafted a perfect physique and then saying, good, did it. For physical health, we're completely aware that it's about regular exercise, regular work. The same thing applies to our spiritual and our emotional lives too. The beauty of life is in the regular effort. And I say make your currency ascetic rather than experiential, because the currency of life is in that work. If we put our value in the work, the effort we put in, the picking ourselves up when we fall, if that's what we see as beautiful, life becomes full of opportunity. When we've put the value in the experiences and the big groundbreaking, oh my gosh, you know, I went on a 2-month trip to Europe and it was everything and I'll never have that good of a life again. And, you know, life becomes disappointing. And it becomes disappointing because we're created to put in that work to be with God. And that ultimately the experience, the ascetic effort will yield a spiritual health that will abide, that will stay with us, that will be eternal. And that's going to be the real beauty. So, yeah.
Any last thoughts or comments? What about you, Deacon Niko? Any last thoughts or comments?
Always fun hanging out with you guys. Can't wait until we can have in-person retreats again.
Me too. I do think we have someone who raised their hand. That's exciting.
Cool.
Justin. Oh, Zoom. We appreciate that you give us so many opportunities for silence and patience.
It's good to have them.
Let's see.
Hello.
Hi, there you are.
Hey, sorry, my videos. Okay. Okay. About video. So my question is, like, when we're talking about getting up immediately, I guess one of my issues is kind of how, like, so I feel like in my experience, it's been talked about, like, oh, just don't think about anything that we've done. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are, and my experience, which is limited because I'm young, that's why I'm here. Thinking about it in terms of like analyzing what has been done, like where I felt, how I felt has been a part of the getting up experience. It's been a part of like, how do I get back on my feet? Well, I need to get my feet out from under whatever it was that tripped me. So it could be, okay, I felt this way before I ate a lot of food. And like gorge myself. So, okay, I need to keep in mind that the next time that I feel this way, that could be a trigger for the pattern or different things like that. So I'm wondering if you would consider like that a part of the getting up, or if even that should not be pondered. And if it's just, no, just don't think about it, just kind of move forward.
No, that's definitely, I mean, I think it too, as I kind of talked a little bit about, learning to sort out what you're thinking and feeling and how it's leading you to different places so that you can address these things spiritually. I think it's important to make those assessments. That's part of getting help. And I don't mean I don't want to make it sound like getting clinical help. I mean, as simple as asking your priest to talk about these things. If you notice a pattern, yeah, absolutely, you bring it up. But there's a big difference. And actually, we have benthos and akivia, right? Benthos are tears of compunction. And it's an honest reflection and recognition of how we've fallen, and that we're going to get back up in repentance. It's a convicted, I've fallen, I cry for it, but I'm going to get myself back up. Akivia is so closely related to benthos. So like they're so similar. And they can look so similar. We have to be so careful, because akivia, on the other hand, akivia is, I fell, I'm so sad and mad, and I'm awful, and I'm going to cry, but these tears are look at me because I'm awful tears, and I notice these patterns, and I'm awful for these patterns. You know what I'm saying? You see how I keep saying I'm awful? It's this self-condemnation. The big difference when we recognize patterns is to ask for help breaking them, and when we don't recognize patterns, ask help identifying them. This is why I bring up therapy as a point here, because sometimes we find that we're stuck in a pattern and we can't figure out how to break it, and that we need some help. We need someone to help us connect. Oh, I end up, drinking a bottle of bourbon every time I have a test coming up because I just can't deal with that, the stress from it. Okay, well, why can't you handle the stress of the test? And you know what I mean? That's what therapy kind of works through.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Matt, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Father Deacon, this is going to be jumping a little bit farther back into what you were talking about. But the reason I asked this now is, honestly, I felt that what you presented today was just sewn together with such a nice stitch, like nice stitches all the way through. It was like, running my hands over a piece of smoothly sewn fabric, right? So I thought it was amazing. We talked about, it almost seemed as we had this distinction between types of sins per se, and I'm really, really careful putting that label on, like it's kind of dangling it there. We talked about these like carnal sins, right? We had, you talked about like the reptilian brain sort of things, and then I'm presuming that everything else, we like the other, I guess, sins of the soul, maybe, I don't know what to call those.
Sometimes.
Intellect, possibly, things like despondency, pride, so on and so forth. The ascesis that we do, the things that we do in terms of, like, say, fasting, which is, you know, dealing with a carnal, like specifically the act of not eating food is dealing with sin of gluttony, like that's kind of the direct correlation there. Are those actions, like, in and of themselves, just to simply help us be able to work through the, I forgot the word you used, Christina, so I'm just going to say non-carnal sins? Like, is that all like a training ground, or are they somehow interrelated and interconnected, so that when I fast and, you know, when I do this and do that, and it's specifically relating to the body, I'm somehow also helping myself be, I guess, helping myself also asking Christ to, there's that important, don't want to forget that, be less prideful or whatever. I'm having trouble linking the two. So.
Yeah, I mean, fasting, so the control we have over our body, well, let's take a second and we'll say, like, the traditional patristic ordering of sins, or it's really more of kind of how they present themselves. The fathers kind of recognize that the reptilian sins, you know, and that lack of control over yourself and your body and the simple things tend to build up, and then they'll lead you to kind of this listlessness and despondency. And that's kind of, so in the Orthodox ordering of sins, the more severe or concerning sins, I guess you could say, are ones related to pride, despondency despondency, actually, akivia is often translated as despondency too. So it's kind of hard to do all these translations, but, you know, those sins are definitely the ones that are they're actually going to end up making the others pop up a lot more, the lack of control sins. One of the easiest ways to fight akivia, to fight despondency, is not only to ask for help, but to have a strong, one of the ways I heard it put is a sabbatical approach, an approach that has strong boundaries. So that would be things like fasting. That would be things like planned rest and timed, you know, when you're going to do certain things, and, you know, length of prayer rule and stuff like that. Like, to have a stronger set of boundaries would definitely help to pull you back from those struggles. That is one of the tools that I didn't get into today, but yeah. Is that what you're getting at?
I was going to say, I think also, like, all of the spiritual practices have multiple layers, and you experience them differently as you go through the spiritual life. So I think, like, it's an easy correlation, like you said, between fasting and gluttony. Like, that's an easy one. Like, well, I'm eating less, so at least I'm not falling into gluttony. Like, you've cut that off. But also, like, we have a connection between, like, fasting and sexual sin, that, like, eating certain foods make us fall into sexual sin more often. And so, like, fasting is helping at that level. And then sometimes, like, maybe if those are no longer temptations that are coming up as much, though, as you're fasting, you start to realize, oh, now I'm taking, like, I've turned a corner, and now, like, look at me, I fast. And you've turned a corner, you know, that fasting has sort of revealed to you now that, okay, maybe sexual sin and gluttony, or lust and gluttony, are not in my heart, but certainly now I see that pride is, or that vanity is. Like, it uncovers other sins, I think. It may not be the only, like, medicine for the sin, but it does have, like, I think, a correlation in, like, unraveling or revealing what's really inside us. if that makes sense. I don't know, add to that, Deacon Niko, or fix it.
No, that's it. That's exactly it. I mean, these are ascetic tools that are essential for Orthodox Christians. They have uses throughout the spectrum of struggles. I mean, and fasting is one. Again, don't sit there and make your own fast rule. Don't sit there and make it your thing. Ask for help. Talk to your priest. Again, I would love it for families to come to me and say, you know, hey, could you just help us come up with some ideas for how we could fast? Fantastic. Wonderful. Let's talk. Because, you know, I mean, to be totally frank, I've had pregnant mothers come to me before who have just taken it on themselves and are feeling sick because they're trying to do a full fast. And I ask, has anyone told you to full fast? They say, no, that's what I thought I had to do. Ask for help. Always ask for help, because things are going to be, you know, people can see you differently than you see yourself. Always ask for help. So.
All right. Deacon Niko, I'm going to ask you to, I magicked the wrong person away. One moment, please. Fun Christina games. There he is. Hi.
I've been promoted to panelist.
I kicked you off. It was an accident. It was for your humility. Actually, I was about to ask you if you would pray for us. I think we will close out our last night. If you have a question you want to ask Deacon Niko, you're welcome to stick around for a couple more minutes, but otherwise we're going to pray and have a great night.
We pray for Holy Father's Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. We'll keep it short.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We've really appreciated you coming, and we've loved doing this with you guys. I hope it's brought some consolation and some new practices to your spiritual life while you're at home. And my encouragement is that you take just one of Father Tom's Maxims and maybe spend the summer on that. And when you fall, get right back up and try again.
Seriously.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Thank you, Deacon Niko.
Have a good night. Good to see y'all.
Bye, Caroline. We will miss
Bye.
you.
I'll miss everyone too.
Good night.